Ladies and gentlemen, First National Picture's greatest star, Colleen Moore. Rebecca. How are you? Nice to see you again.
Well, it's nice to be here.
We're old friends. We did this last night, and they said we're going to keep doing it till we get it right, okay?
Correct.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I read a very delightful telegram that you received? May I share it with the audience tonight?
Yes, please.
I'd like to read this. It says, how wonderful that you are honoring not only a great talent, but a superhuman being who I can proudly say is one of my best friends forever. I send her the most superior notice I can send anyone because she deserves it. Bravo, Colleen Moore. Your devoted, Lillian Gish. Isn't that nice?
She's one of my dearest friends, and I think she's the greatest actress in the world. And you'd love her. Oh, you have? You've had her. She's been here.
We have loved her in person on this very stage.
Oh, well, you have to. You couldn't help it.
I know the people are very curious to find out something about you. They're very curious about stars. Could you and I sneak back here and have a little chat and let them listen in?
And let's talk about our neighbors, too. My neighbors.
We'll talk about your neighbors. Okay,
Yeah.
Let's do it. There you are. This wasn't rehearsed. We just planned this, and the chairs happened to be here. It's all. The obvious question is that's always asked: how did you get started in pictures back in that great heyday? How did it happen for you?
Well, I was a payoff, really. My uncle was a rather famous newspaper man in Chicago. And Mr. Griffith was having a terrible time getting The Birth of a Nation and Intolerance past the censors. And my uncle evidently had a lot of political clout because he arranged it. And after the pictures were shown and everything was arranged, Mr. Griffith said to my uncle, "What can I do to repay you?" And poor Mr. Griffith heard my uncle say, "I have a niece." And Mr. Griffith said, "Not a niece." And my uncle said, "Yes." I was a payoff. So I had a 6-month contract to Hollywood, and my family said, "Oh, this is all right." My mother said, when my father objected, only because of education, Mother said she can have her lessons sent from the convent, and she won't miss a day, and this is much worse than the measles. They were sure that I'd be home in 6 months. Only my grandmother, who took me to Hollywood, and I stayed on.
Yes, you did.
You know, this is really lovely. My grandmother had a very stiff back, and she was very, very Victorian and proper. And so she took me to Hollywood. And after, maybe 2 or 3 years, she said to me, "You know, I think if they'd had movies in Dublin when I was a girl, I too would have been an actress."
I used a line of yours earlier tonight in the introduction. You talked about, I think you said we were just a bunch of kids having the time of our lives. What was it like on those sets back in those days?
Just that. We had the time of our lives. And when I wasn't working, when once in a while I'd have a day off, where did I go? To the studio, because that's where the fun was. We had a good time.
I have to ask you, well, first let's talk about the scripts. What kind of scripts did you work from?
Well, not too long ago, I found an old script, and I opened it up. I couldn't believe it. Here was a page absolutely blank, and all it had written on it was love scene. And then a little later, just was written, gag here. We had titles, of course, that we had to say, and actions sketchily done. And we really made them up as we went along.
You told me that a guy in the light crew would shout down and say, "Why don't you try this?"
Yes, yes. Oh, and we had a thing, you see, if you gave us a good gag, anybody on the set, you got $50.
Oh, okay.
Once I made 100.
Okay. How did the writers feel about that you were
Oh,
infringing on their territory?
They didn't mind. They thought that I was prejudiced.
I would imagine working from a very sparse script,
Yeah.
and movies being what they were, the chances to steal scenes had to be just spectacular.
Oh, unbelievable. You never wanted a child 5 or under it. They stole every scene.
And
or
animals?
a dog.
Or a dog.
Oh, a dog was fatal.
Tell me, what technique did you use to steal a scene? Did you have many?
Oh, I had several. Oh, many. No, not really.
How about the shoulder thing?
Oh,
The
yeah.
upstage?
Well, that's technical. It's really very funny. There's a thing, and it's in the theater, it's called upstaging. And the way you upstage, when I first started, an old actor on the set, all that was being photographed was my left ear. And so, because they got me turned around, you see, and they were toward the camera. And he told me how to do it. The foot that is nearest the camera, you kind of put behind like a ballet dancer, and it switches you around, and then there's your face in the camera and the other guy's ear. So, so this was years later, and I had perfected it, as had every other actor. And I was in a scene, it was three of us, a 3-shot with Milton Sills, Conway Turrell, and I was the third. And they chalk your feet, you see, for the focus, so that you won't get out of focus. And our feet were chalked, and we were ready to do the scene when I noticed Milton Sills got out of his footsteps and moved back, and my ear was coming around. And so I jumped back. And then Conway Turrell jumped back, and we were all out of focus. So we had to go back and do it over again. And before long, we were all out of focus again. So the directors got a big board, and they put it behind, you see, behind our feet, so we were stationary. And so, and so I noticed Conway Turrell jumped over the board. Milton Sills jumped over. Well, I wasn't going to be left behind. I was the star, so I jumped over so my ears wouldn't be out there. So then the way they solved the question was, solved the scene, they did it in 3 individual close-ups.
I mentioned in the slide presentation that you fell off a handcar making the Desert Flower,
Yes,
suffered a
I
broken
did.
neck.
Yes, I did.
The audience may be curious to know, did you do basically your own stunts? I know you had a double for the high heels. That must have been funny.
Yes,
Was that really the first time you'd ever been in high heels?
Well, yes, I was just a little girl.
You were 15.
Yeah, well, almost 16.
Did you walk like Leon Errol, or how did you walk in those
I just
high?
walked clumped down. They had to cut off all the long shots. And then the director said to me, now go and practice walking around the block in the heels till you get used to them. Well, of course, there was a good reason in those days why they had people wonder why they used such very young girls. Well, the close-ups, well, you know how big a close-up is. Well, only the youngest and finest skin could stand a close-up. So by 20, your career was over. You were an old hag. And then came those marvelous, well, first of all, Mr. Griffith did it with Broken Blossoms. He put black mullein over the camera, and it did little break-up things, and I mean, it just looked wonderful. And out of that came the diffusing lenses, which Eastman made. And, there were round ones and different kinds, and blonde ones and red ones.
Made you look pretty good.
Pretty good. You could be 20 years old and look 8.
Well, hey. Well, Mickey Rooney at 5 must have looked like a baby with that lens there.
Not quite born.
How about your work day? Now, maybe work day, how long did it take to make one of your films? Let's talk about that a little bit.
It was interesting.
I think you're covering your mic too. There you go.
Oh,
okay.
there. I'm all wired up. There, and I have to talk to my left side. I hope I'm still in focus.
You notice... You'll notice in this scene they're getting my ear here. You've done a good job on me.
I have.
Let's talk about the workday.
Well, we began before dawn practically. I would get up. I worked terribly hard. I loved it though, every minute. I'd get up and about 6 o'clock, and in pajamas and a coat, I'd get in my car and be driven to the studio where I had a little bungalow, a darling little house. And there I would have breakfast, have a bath, get dressed for the scene. The hairdresser would come in to be sure that every hair was cut correctly. And the press agent would come in and tell you what from his department you had to do for the day. And by 9 o'clock, I was on the set. I'm always on time. And the day began. And as it unfolded, it was more fun. But we didn't finish till about, 5:30, 6 o'clock. No unions. And so then we would go over and look at the rushes, what we'd done the day before. If it wasn't right, then we'd have to do it over the next day. And then as the picture progressed, it was being cut. And then we'd have to look at that, put it together, see if we needed a little bit here and a little bit there. And I usually got home about 7:30 or 8 o'clock and was so tired and always had a tray and dinner in bed and went to sleep. But I was young and I could stand it.
How many weeks would it take to, say, make a...
When I hear of these pictures taking 2 and 3 years, I can't believe it. Well, of course, our pictures were different. They weren't spectacles. It took us about 6 to 8 weeks to make a picture.
How much would it cost in those days?
Around $350,000 minus my salary.
So about $100,000 then. Just kidding. You mentioned that it was kind of a breakthrough in Hollywood the first time they made what you referred to as $1 million picture.
Oh, no, it wasn't the first time, but all my friends were making these great spectacles. You know, $1 million. Well, today that it might be, 18 or 20 million, I suppose. Well, anyway, I wanted $1 million picture, and I wanted it to play in New York for the great sum of $1. So I yelled and hollered so, and my pictures happened to bring in a great deal of money, so I had a lot of clout, and I used it. And they said, all right, we'll let you have $1 million picture. So we made Lilac Time. And, you know, thank heavens it made a lot of money for them, because otherwise they might have shot me. They had a big insurance.
Yes.
I was heavily insured by the company.
You said Lilac Time took 3 months, I think you told me to make.
3 months, which was
long.
a long time. Yeah. Right.
Let's talk about some of the people you worked with. John Barrymore. We hear such great stories about John. Prodigious actor, and he was also prodigious in some other areas as well.
Yes.
What was he like to work with?
Well, he was very kind. Here he was, the greatest actor considered, and I think he was, the greatest actor on the New York stage. And here I was a young, struggling young actress, and here I played opposite him. And I just trembled at the thought of playing with John Barrymore, and the first scene I had to do was a love scene. Oh, I suffered.
How did he... I'll do my take.
Yeah, he said, my dear, or my darling, or something like that, and I was supposed to run in his arms, and I tell you, I tripped. I could hardly move.
What did he say to you? You remember the first, did he try and put you at ease at all?
Oh, immediately at ease. And he was, well, let me tell you how dear he was to me. He and Ethel and Lionel were going to appear in a New York play written by Barrymore's wife. And he offered me the part of a little blind girl. Well, I thought that was marvelous. I wanted to be on the stage, too. So I was under contract to Marshall Nealon, but he wouldn't let me go.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yes, that would have been...
Did you ever do any stage work?
Not too bad. The play only lasted 2 weeks.
That was good. That was good. That was good. Let's talk about some other people. Spencer Tracy, you made The Power and the Glory, which you told me is one of your favorites.
Yes, well, you know, every comedian likes a drama.
Yes.
Yes, I have to.
What was Spencer Tracy like, the very young Spencer Tracy?
Well, beautiful to work with, marvelous. I think a very great actor.
I want to ask you about Tom Mix, and before I do,
But
you know...
do you know who my favorite actor is today?
That was my next question. You want to...
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, Dustin Hoffman. Oh, I think he's wonderful. I think he's the best thing we've ever produced. From one picture to the next, you don't recognize him.
That's great. You made a couple of westerns early on with Tom Mix, and I wanted to say that I don't know what year it was when this was a vaudeville theater. Tom Mix and his famous horse Tony. Well, I think Tom Mix is where you were and Tony was where I am now. That's still the same. There's got to be a straight line there someplace. I can't think of it. But Tom Mix and Tony were on this stage. You made a couple of westerns with him.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it was marvelous. I learned, the cowboys taught me to ride. Oh, I must tell you, when I was sent out for the job, you see, to get, hoping to get this job as Tom Mix's leading lady. This was something big for a little actress just starting. And so they said to me, "Can you ride?" I said, "Of course I can ride." I couldn't. I'd only been on a pony when I was this big. So I got on the horse, and off it went, and I landed up on the top of a mountain between the horse's ears. Luckily, there was a cowboy up there to take me off, and he said, "You don't know how to ride, do you?" And I said, "No, but I wanted the job so badly. I wanted to play with Tom Mix." And he said, "We'll teach you to ride." And the cowboys taught me to ride.
We have to talk about your dollhouse, which is now, I believe, on display at the Museum in Chicago.
Yes.
Built to the cost of about $435,000. It is completely done in miniature and is, I guess, running water and electricity.
Oh.
Tell us about the Colleen Moore dollhouse.
Yes, and 435, dear, was in old dollars.
Yeah, good bucks.
Well, I've always had a dollhouse. The first one, I was 2 years old, and my parents made me one out of cigar boxes. And after I had a daughter, I realized they didn't make it for me, they made it for themselves. Yes, it's true. So the years went by, and I had many dollhouses, and my father, who loved miniatures, as did I, we went to Honolulu, and on the way over, my father said, "Let's build a dollhouse." I said, "But I have a lovely Italian villa that you built me." "Oh, no," he said, "let's get artists, an architect, and let's build a fairy castle." Well, I had a collection I'd been collecting for a long time of little silver furniture, little gold, precious things, especially after I had my own money. Yes,
Yeah.
It helps.
Yes, it does.
So we went back to the studio immediately, and the man who did all my sets was carried away with the idea, and he said, "We will make every child's dream of fairyland, this house, but we'll do it from an adult viewpoint." And the adult viewpoint was, what wouldn't people have? Well, people wouldn't have a floor in their drawing room made of rose quartz and jade, and a chandelier made of real gold, about this big. The scale is a 12th. And it hung with, instead of crystal beads, jewelry, diamonds, emeralds. That's why I have no jewelry. You see, nothing.
It's all in the dollhouse.
All in the dollhouse.
And running water and electricity.
Running water. And oh, it was such fun. We said the princess likes antique furniture. So she goes out to the antique shops in Fairyland, and she found King Arthur's round table, Sleeping Beauty's bed, the Three Bears chairs, and so on. And then we put a chapel in. And really one of my most precious things in there was given to me by Claire Booth Luce, who's one of my close and dear friends. Claire was, as you know, our first ambassador, a woman ambassador to an important country, and she was to Italy. And she was a new Catholic and had her first visit with the Pope. And the Pope gave her a little medallion about that big, and in it, a sliver of the alleged true cross. And she said, "I'm going to give that to you to put on the altar in your dollhouse in memory of my daughter who was killed." And this was a very sad thing for her. So I was thrilled to death, but I didn't care for the Pope's taste in the medallion.
We won't tell him.
No. So I had a beautiful monstrance made of gold and with diamonds, and then it says, in memory of Claire Brokaw, and so forth. And then they put the little alleged piece of the true cross there, and it's on the altar in my little dollhouse.
How about the piano? There's a miniature piano.
Oh, yes, and I have a marvelous library. I have over 100 books. I had them made this big with blank pages, and then the authors come to Hollywood, or your best friend knows them, and I had them write in their own handwriting first parts of their bestsellers, and then signing it. And I have all those little books. And then I have a Bible, a little Bible, but this is real. It was printed from type in the year 1840, and it isn't quite as big as my thumbnail, and it was printed from type, not this photographic process.
Tell them the music on the music stand on the piano. Who wrote that?
Yeah, George Gershwin wrote one of them.
George
but
Gershwin.
I have people of that count. Oh, I'm very snobby about the house.
Oh, that's exciting. And it's on display in Chicago. Should people go to visit in Chicago?
Yes.
Where can they see it?
Yeah, and it's free, the Museum of Science and Industry.
Okay.
But before I finish the dollhouse, I have to tell them about my first treasure. It was a dictionary about that big, again from type, that my father brought me, and it came in a little silver case, and then there was a little glass in the front, a magnifying glass. And when I was only about 6 years old, and when he gave it to me, I wore it on a ribbon around my neck, and he said, now, when you grow up and you can read, you'll find in that little book all the words for a happy life.
Oh, that's
that
nice.
was sweet.
That is nice.
Yes. He was quite a guy.
We're going to see another film clip in just a moment or two with It's Lilac Time with you and Gary Cooper. Gary Cooper.
Yeah, oh yes, Gary Cooper.
Quite a hunk, wasn't he, when he came to Hollywood, you tell me?
I tell you, no one ever visited my set until Gary Cooper was playing opposite me, and then every secretary from the front office, every girl in the whole place was on my set. I knew they hadn't come to see me, and I said, this guy's a star. And he was, after the picture.
I have to ask you, you told me you liked The Power and the Glory. They also mentioned, was it Lilac Time as a film by which you're probably best remembered? Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a goodie. You want to set...
Oh, I have to tell you a funny story about Lilac Time.
Okay.
I wanted to make an impression on my granddaughter. And I thought, well, I'll run one of my old pictures. So I thought, what's the matter? Well, I'll run Lilac Time. Now techniques have changed. And there's a scene in Lilac Time where Gary Cooper's going off to war, and then a great close-up of me comes with the tears streaming down my cheeks. And I thought, well, the old girl isn't too bad. When she piped up and said, Grandma, you're almost as good as Phyllis Diller. You can't win.
Oh. I wish we had another hour and a half to talk, or 2 or 3, but we'll show them the clip, and they'll get an idea of Lilac Time. Colleen Moore, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.